Hey everyone, and welcome to What Did I Miss?, where today I'll be discussing the 6th episode of the final season of Star Trek Discovery, titled Whistlespeak. This entry continues the crew's quest to find the progenitors' technology as they are sent to a pre-warp civilization where they find a planet ravaged by dust storms. Burnham and Tilly must find a way to infiltrate the planet, save it from itself, while also adhering to the standard known as the Prime Directive, in what turns out to be a very familiar style of episode to Star Trek fans. But before I get into it, I just want to thank you for clicking on this video and remind you that the best way to help support the work that I do is to hit that like button and to subscribe for future videos. So first I will discuss my review and then I will go into Easter eggs. If you just want to skip to the Easter eggs, time codes are listed in the description below. So first of all, my review. Out of the 6 episodes so far this season, I probably like this one the least, which is disappointing because I really liked the first act and the introduction of the Whistlespeak component to the story, which I found pretty original. But after the crew discusses it on the ship and use it once on the planet, it is almost completely forgotten. Then the rest of the episode is basically just a retelling of the Shirley Jackson story, The Lottery. And I'm going to talk about more about that, but I really was disappointed with this episode because it really fell flat for me after the first act. I thought the Whistlespeak thing was really cool, and I thought that was going to play out into the whole episode, and maybe that was part of the clue and that they had to learn it and stuff like that. But it really turned out that they just used it in one scene, and then once Tilly and Burnham catch up with that group, I don't think it's mentioned again. So I really thought that was a swing and a miss for Discovery that would have been really cool to go into and would have been really original, but they just kind of dropped it. And I don't really understand why they named the episode Whistlespeak if you're only going to talk about that one aspect for a little bit and then drop it. I thought it was going to mean more for the episode, and I think it would have done better if they would have incorporated it more into the plot of the story, but it was just like this thing that happened, more like a MacGuffin, and they just move on. But there were things that I liked, and one thing that I really liked, once again, was Mary Weissman as Tilly. It really seems like they're setting up Mary Weissman to star in the new Starfleet Academy series, and this episode was a good showcase for her. I really find her performance to be one of the most genuine of the entire cast, and I'm glad that she will get to continue to play this character on a new series. I know that I've talked in my past reviews about some of the actors and some of the characters on Star Trek Discovery and how I find them to be disingenuous and some of the acting isn't great, but there's something so genuine about how Mary Weissman plays Tilly. There's one point in this episode where it's after she took that sugar cube that made her super thirsty, that she's running with Rava, I think was the character's name, and she turns to Rava and she goes, "You're a little shit," you know that? That was just such a real reaction. Like if I was Tilly, that's how I would have reacted in that situation. So just little scenes like that really, I think, are endearing to her character. And I'm glad that of all the characters in Star Trek Discovery, they identified her as one that could move on to another series. Now, I know that Star Trek Discovery, the writers and creators of Star Trek Discovery, didn't know that they were getting canceled when they first filmed the season, but they probably knew that Starfleet Academy was being set up as a new series, so they probably knew that Tilly was going to move on to that series, and they're doing a great job this season in setting her up to make that move. So I really like that, and I found her to be one of my favorite parts of this episode. Even though this is the 3rd episode in a row not to feature Doug Jones, it does seem like Star Trek Discovery is making an effort to give each and every character a chance to shine, as we keep seeing Burnham paired with a different character each week. And I know that has been a critique of Discovery in the past, that characters just get lost for huge parts of the season, and we don't get to see them again, kind of like what's happening with Saru this season. But Saru did have an episode where he and Burnham got to do something together, and it was really a Saru-style episode. And we've seen that, this week it was Burnham and Tilly. Last episode, it was Burnham and Booker. The episode before that, it was Burnham with Rayner and Stamets. And then the episode before that was what I just mentioned with Saru. So again, the writers on Discovery didn't know that season 5 was going to be their last season, but it is playing out pretty well in that we are getting a showcase for each of the supporting characters in each episode. So it works well as a last season because we get, one more big to-do with each character. And I like that. I like that they're doing that this season. And again, it plays well into this being the last season for the show. I also really like the B-plot with Culber and how he is having a spiritual awakening. Many people believe that Star Trek negates people's spiritual beliefs and states that everything is created from science, which is not true, because there have been plenty of episodes and even films that have dealt with spirituality in the Star Trek universe and how both science and God can exist. And I really like that, and I wish they would have leaned into that a little bit more in this episode. Maybe that's a plot line that's going to kind of bridge multiple episodes, Culber, with the spiritual awakening. But I do hope they go more into that, because I find that very interesting, how someone can believe in science and believe in spirituality. A lot of people have a hard time grasping that. They think it's got to be black and white. Either you believe God created everything, or you believe science created everything. And I think that showing that there is a middle ground, and really that's where Star Trek wants to exist. You can believe in the Big Bang and also believe in God. I think that that's an important point. So I'm glad that the writers on Discovery decided to do that this season, and specifically how they handled it this episode. And I hope that it continues. I like Hugh Culber. I think that's a great character. I wouldn't mind seeing him continue on. And I like, his interactions with the crew. He's another actor character that I find to be very genuine. And I liked it. I like the B plot probably a little bit more than the A plot this episode, because I really like that discussion of science versus spirituality versus both. I really like that. And I hope we learn more about that this season through Culber's eyes. But all in all, besides the character work by Tilly and Culber, I found this episode to be lacking and pretty mundane. I think they had a good idea, and instead of fleshing that out with the Whistlespeak, which admittedly would have been difficult in one episode. I mean, to create this whole language just for one episode, I understand that's a lot of heavy lifting. But instead, the writers chose to go with a storyline that felt overused. All in all, not my favorite episode, probably my least favorite of the season so far. There were parts that I like. I think Tilly did a good job. I think Culber did a good job. But besides that, I found it to be pretty average. It was pretty much like Star Trek by numbers, if you know, like paint by numbers. It was just, kind of a lot of stuff that Star Trek has done before thrown into one episode. Let me know, what did you think of this episode? Do you agree with me, or did you like it and you have different opinions? Let me know in the comments below. So now I'm going to go over the Easter eggs for the episode. There weren't a ton, but I was able to pick out a few. First of all, the title of the episode, Whistlespeak, and the concept of a language based around the practice of whistling is taken from many actual languages that used to be found all around the world. As described in this episode, many cultures used a whistled language to communicate over long distances without the use of modern technology, and that has to do with echolocation and stuff like that. So in doing my diligence for this episode, I found it to be pretty interesting that there were actually quite a few cultures around the world, many different continents, that used to whistle as a language. As I mentioned in my review, many aspects of the plotline of this episode are similar to those found in the short story The Lottery, which was written by Shirley Jackson. In that story, a village selects one person every year to be sacrificed for the perceived betterment of the community. The story has been adapted many times since and has been hailed for its examination of both the mob mentality and also blind tradition, which this episode also attempts to discuss. And I definitely went into this during my review, so I'm not going to rehash any of that. You can listen to my review if you want to know more. But definitely through the second and third act, it really reminded me of The Lottery a lot. The plotline of this episode may also be a callback to the very first episode of Star Trek Discovery named The Vulcan Hello. That episode began with Burnham and Captain Philippa Georgiou trying to save a pre-warp civilization from a drought, similar to what Tilly and now Captain Burnham attempt in this episode. So it's another kind of full circle thing, where Star Trek Discovery, I think, is referencing things from its past, and I wouldn't be surprised if the writers included that in this episode because of it. Burnham and Tilly must disguise themselves as the indigenous population due to the Prime Directive, which states that no Starfleet officer may intervene in the development of a non-warp civilization. However, this rule has been broken so often that it begs to question, why is it even still a rule in the 32nd century? Virtually every Star Trek crew has not just broken the Prime Directive, but also had to disguise themselves on a similar style mission, with the first example being the original series episode, The Return of the Archons. The sound cure used on a native in distress is performed using real Tibetan singing bowls, which are actually used in musical therapy and also make for some great ASMR. It is explained that the weather systems on the planet were built by a Denoblian scientist. The beloved character Dr. Phlox from the series Star Trek Enterprise was also Denoblian, and through him, the audience learned many things about his unique culture. There are also similarities between this episode and the original series episode titled The Paradise Syndrome. That episode also dealt with a Starfleet crew helping a planet by fixing an ancient technology that was built to protect the inhabitants. In a blink and you will miss it moment, the names of the 5 scientists that created the treasure hunt this season are listed, and the one from Betazoid is given the name Marina Derex, which is undoubtedly a nod to actress Marina Sirtis, who played the Betazoid Deanna Troi on Star Trek The Next Generation for 7 seasons and on. Towards the end of the episode, we learn that Locke and Mole have been found by a ship named the USS Lockerer. This is named after Star Trek Discovery crew member J.P. Lockerer, who passed away unexpectedly in 2022. Well, that was everything I saw, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Thank you very much for watching. Please hit that like button before you go, and I'll see you next time on What Did I Miss?